My name is, here we go, there we are. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fiona Lindsay, and it's my huge pleasure to welcome you to the 17th edition of the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. It's fantastic to see so many people here on this beautiful late Sunday afternoon, and we are in for a treat, as our guest is one of the UK's most loved, most versatile, hardest working, most talented actresses that we have. For nearly 6 decades, she has, in her own words, been pretending to be other women. She has played mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, friends, girlfriends, you name it, she's played them. And no matter the role, she stepped into every single part with huge amounts of craft, authenticity, integrity, love, and masses of humour. But again, as she says, she inhabits these people only for a moment. And at the end of the day, she takes off her costume, the costume of the women she plays, and puts on her own clothes and returns to herself. We're here this evening to celebrate the recent publication of her memoir, Out of Character. Here, very much as herself and in her own character, please give a huge Dubai welcome to Alison Steadman.
Whoa. I made it.
Yes, keep it going.
Yeah, it's awful. I'm in that chair, aren't I? Fiona?
So this is the moment.
There?
Yes, I'll be here. You want the?
Let me here.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Talk amongst yourselves, because actually Alison did not arrive in Dubai like this. And that's going to be the first point of conversation, obviously. And these two wonderful men are going to be helping Alison into the chair, if that's okay. Can you hear this with this mic? It's not echoey. That's great. Okay. Fabulous. So, and we have to give everybody a round of applause once we manage this. 1, 2, 3, and up.
Okay.
And we're nearly there.
Wait a minute.
And not another accident. And off we go.
Oh, right.
Oh, indeed. Oh, Alison. Oh, Alison, what happened?
Oh, I don't know.
Was it a
I was
camel?
trying to get a gin and tonic, and I was... Well, no, I was at the... can you hear us both okay? Is it all right?
Great.
Good. At the desert, at a concert the other night. I'm very excited to be there. And there were beautiful seats laid out and a buffet, in the corner and everything. And I went to get some pudding. And I was walking along a walkway. It was a concrete walkway that wasn't 100% smooth, I have to say. And suddenly, you know what it's like when you fall? It was like a dream. I tripped, and it felt like I went up in the air about 5 feet and then just crashed down on this concrete. It was absolutely horrible. I landed on this foot and this hand, and I was in absolute agony. And honestly, if there's anyone here now who was at the concert the other night and helped me, thank you so much, because everyone was so kind. And believe me, I needed some kindness because I was in absolute agony. Anyway, they called an ambulance, and an ambulance arrived fairly quickly, and this very nice lady, paramedic, ran over to me, and I'm lying on the concrete like this, and she said to me, "Now then, how did you fall off the camel?" And I thought, am I dreaming? What's going on? I said, "What camel? I didn't fall off a camel."
Maybe
she
you
said,
did.
"Oh, you didn't fall off a camel?" I said, "No." And I was thinking, please let this be over. But anyway, I don't know where she got that information from. But anyway, I didn't fall off a camel. And they were very kind, got me in the ambulance, immediately gave me a cannula with painkillers in. And it didn't cure pain totally, but it certainly helped. And everyone was lovely at the hospital. And everyone has been lovely here at the festival since I got back. So thank you all very much indeed.
And we're delighted that you are here to tell that tale.
Tell the
amongst
tale.
Many, many others. I think it's a wonderful, strange as it seems, and it was an unfortunate thing to happen, but I think it's also a wonderful, the fact that you are here is a wonderful example of your trooperness, your resilience, your tenacity, your determination that the show must go on. Because a lesser person would have just gone, I don't want to go on anymore, I'll go home. But you would never do that.
No.
And what I love about your story in this book, from the get-go, there is a wonderful flavour of that strength of character. And indeed, in the prologue, you are there, standing in front of a mirror, having a discussion with yourself about what to wear, what not to wear, for a scene in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Can you share that with us, please?
Well, the prime of Miss Jean Brodie was my first job. And I was still at drama school, and I was asked during the Easter holidays to go and play this part. So you can imagine my first professional job. And at drama school, you learn a lot, but you don't really learn until you get on stage and you start working in theatres. That's when you really learn. And so there I was, trying to think, right, and be in character and do this and do that. And I had heard that the prime of Miss Jean Brodie had been on at a West End theatre in London. And as I looked, I saw my costume, and I'm looking at it, and I could see the name of the actress who played my part in the West End on the costume. So there I was going to be wearing her costume, and it was so exciting. I was so thrilled. And I just remember, the first performance, nervous, but the thrill of it all. And then when what's the comedian, there's a Scottish
Stanley
comedian,
Baxter.
Stanley Baxter, and his phrase was, and this is the real me, at the end of his show. And because I'm playing someone Scottish in the play, and I came into the bar of the theatre, and various people from the audience were still there. And I said, and this is the real me. Why did I do that?
You might have done it because for some part of the show, you actually lie on a chaise longue, not with very much on.
This is true. Yes, I had to strip all my clothes off. Aged, was I 22 or something, and lie with my back to the audience. And they offered me what's known as a body stocking. I don't know if you've ever seen a body stocking or worn one, but it's basically like wearing a swimsuit that is like a pair of nylon stockings. So it kind of hides things, but it doesn't hide things. And actually, I was given one to try out, and I put it on, looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought, no way am I wearing this. This is more embarrassing than having no clothes on. And so I posed on the chaise longue, and it was absolutely fine. We had a lovely actor playing, the teacher that was supposed to be doing the drawing of me. And of course, when I got back to drama school to do my final term, well, I was the talk of the drama school, you can imagine, particularly the girls, all coming up to say, you stripped off naked on stage, Yes, I did strip off naked on stage. And don't forget, this was 1969. It wouldn't be that eventful now. It would be quite normal for, people to do that. But then it was really unheard of. But I just thought, I'm doing it, So, and it was a lovely production, and we had a great time, yeah.
I love that phrase, the Stanley Baxter phrase, this is the real me. And whenever we meet, I'm always struck by how very much yourself you are. There's no artifice. You play these amazing characters in the way that you do, but when you take their clothes off, you're so very much yourself. And when we last met, you just finished Gavin and Stacey, the filming of Gavin and Stacey, the final episode of Gavin and Stacey, which you filmed in the late summer and autumn, which involved you getting up at What time in the morning? For weeks on end?
Oh, well, I filmed Gavin and Stacey. I think we filmed for 5 weeks. And then went with a week's break straight onto a series called Here We Go for the BBC. And we filmed 7 episodes. So that was another 7 weeks filming. And yeah, so you have to get up 4:30 in the morning. And yeah, so it's, you really have to be strong and feisty and do it. But you have to do it. That's the job, because the camera has to turn over at 8 o'clock. So you've got to get up, get my shower, get myself ready, get in the car, be driven to the location. Then when you get there, you've got to have your hair and makeup done, put your costume on, get on the set, rehearse, the scene that you're going to do. And then the camera has to be rolling at 8 o'clock. So you've got to do it. There's no choice, and that's what it's all about. So yeah, exhausting though it is, it's thrilling.
It's what you have to do.
Yeah.
And one of the times you've spoken of that early morning, the strange beauty of that early morning, and stepping out into your garden and that time between leaving the door and getting into the car.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, because it's still dark, there's nobody around, it's quiet, and you can hear the birds are just starting to sing their dawn chorus. Or there might be a fox, in the garden, and they sort of look at you and your eyes meet. Yeah, I was filming. I got up at. I was actually filming something else, but it was. I was being picked up at 4:30. Completely crazy. I had a 2-hour journey to make to the location, and I was in the kitchen just having a quick cup of tea before I left, and I just pulled back the curtain in the kitchen, and there outside there was a fox, and this fox literally went and stayed still for about a minute, just staring at me, as much as say, what's going on? Is that a human being up at this time? This is my time in the garden. But yeah, and I love just listening. Sometimes there's an owl calling, and I just stand and listen. And I think, if I'm 2 minutes late, that's fine. Let me have this 2 minutes of listening to the birds just starting to sing. And it's a lovely time. It's so special. I love it.
You've had a love of wildlife from the get-go, from when you were a tiny, tiny child.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I think it was from my grandparents. Both sets of grandparents loved wildlife, fed the birds, taught me how to watch for birds, be respectful to animals. Yeah, and I loved dogs, and my mum wouldn't let me have a dog. But at the time, everybody seemed to have a dog, so I had all these dogs in the neighborhood, in the street where I lived, and dogs used to roam free then. It was very different, and I used to love it, and I just grew up loving animals. And yeah, I mean, now, the flat where I live in London, I have a bird feeder at the back and at the front, and when I'm eating my breakfast, I'm watching the birds. And it's like seeing friends in the garden, and they're popping. I couldn't live without that. I have to fill the feeders with seeds, and just watch them fly in and out, and it's lovely. I love it.
You mentioned your Mr. Fox, and there are 2 very amusing stories in Out of Character about a fox. And one is during, you had to wear a fox stole during a production for ITV. Tell us about that.
Oh yes, I was. What was the actress?
Elaine Stritch.
Elaine Stritch. I was working. It was a series with Elaine Stritch, and she, in one way, she was very nice, but in another way, she was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And hi, Alison, she was like this, so terrifying. And she used to come every day with a little tiny dog, little sort of lap dog, and she'd say to this dog, if you're not quiet, you'll go in the bag. And this little dog would look at her, like this. I mean, she wasn't cruel to the dog, but, she had to do something to keep it quiet. Well, this particular day, it was standing there going, and she said, right, you'll go in the bag. And it kept barking, so she picked it up, she put it in this bag and zipped the bag across. and left the dog in there just for a couple of minutes to teach it a lesson, and then let it out. Anyway, so I was kind of laughing inside at this. And then we were starting to film, and we were in the studio, and I had a fox fur around my neck as my character. And we were standing there, camera, they were fiddling with lenses, changing lenses. And so I was just standing there, and she was standing there. And I got the fox's head and went, "What, what?" And I said, "You'll go in the bag. You'll go in the bag." And she looked at me and she said, "Alison, no jokes about the dog." And I went, I'm terribly sorry. I'm so sorry. And she was like, oh, she was really scary. And we started filming, and she made a mistake in the first couple of sentences, which is quite normal. We had a studio audience, and she, "Can I swear? Would you mind?" Because she immediately went, "Oh, for fuck's sake." And, this was like in the early 70s, and I was really shocked. I mean, I would never swear in front of an audience. She was quite a character. She really was. She really was.
But you mentioned there that, playing a joke, and you hadn't intended it to be anything other than a joke. But you've come from, it was again in your DNA, you've come from a family that liked pranking, that liked making jokes. Your grandmother was a particular one.
Oh yes, my maternal grandmother. She was completely nuts when I look back. And one day she came round to the house, and she'd made an apple pie for the family. And for some reason, best known to herself, she dressed up in my grandfather's clothes, tucked her hair up, and put his flat cap on. She arrived at the house dressed as my grandfather in a flat cap, carrying an apple pie. And my father, who was the kindest, most gentle man on this planet, he never raised his voice, never mind hit me or hit anybody or, he lost his temper. He was a sweet-natured man. But he opened the door, and it was a dark night, and there she was standing there, dressed as this man, and immediately went to come in the house with this apple pie and push past him. So he naturally thought it was a complete stranger trying to come in the house and do God knows what. So he punched her in the face. She flew across the garden and landed luckily on the grass in the front of the garden. Because she always said, "Oh, he knew it was me. He knew it was me." And of course my father said, "I didn't know it was her." But this was the kind of thing that she would do. And she was an eccentric kind of woman, but great fun and very kind and lovely. And I have lots of happy memories. And sadly, she died when I think I was 11. And I missed her terribly when she died. And she taught me how to feed the birds, what to look out for. She used to make her own bird feeders out of concrete. She'd have a metal bowl, and then she'd put concrete round it and make this thing. And then, put little things around the edge, little pictures, she was wonderful. She was wonderful. And I grew up loving watching birds and being kind to animals. So thank you to both my grandmothers for that, and my Aunt Hilda.
She also taught you how to tell a joke, do a prank. And you had in your house, you had two older sisters, but you were often alone. So you would make things up, make stories up. And you shocked your mum and dad when you were quite young, actually, by appearing in a very, very sort of dramatic fashion in front of them.
Yeah, well, my sisters were 10 and 12 and a half years older than me. So they married quite young when they were in their early 20s. So I was left on my own, and I hated it. I was so lonely. And at night when I went to bed, I would constantly be pretending to be characters and playing characters and on my own. And I went in to get ready for bed this night. I went in the bathroom, and my sister had left behind this tube of toothpaste. It sounds extraordinary now, but it was bright red. And the idea was that you brushed your teeth with this, and it made your gums pink, very pink, and made your teeth look whiter. I mean, it was ridiculous. But anyway, this was, and I looked at it, I thought, gosh, that looks like blood. Wow. So I got it and immediately scrolls from here and let it drip down here. I thought, wow, that looks like blood. So I put some more here, let it come down there. I looked at myself. I thought, wow, my God, look at that. I'm going to show Mum and Dad this. So I went downstairs, opened the living room door. My poor Mum and Dad sitting there quietly watching television. And of course, I didn't go, oh, look, Mum, this looks like blood. I acted out and flung myself on the floor and went, ah, lying on the floor. My poor mother thought I'd had this terrible, smashed my face, all this blood was coming down. So she's immediately thinking, Dad, call an ambulance, look, And then, of course, I went, fooled you, My mum was furious with me, absolutely furious.
But that was one of your first performances, and on a regular basis at home in the living room, you were asked to perform. Did that give you the bug? What did your mum ask you to perform?
Well, it was mainly, there was a comedian called Hilda Baker. Some of you may remember her. She was an incredibly clever, talented woman, and she was on television a lot. And she'd do a sitcom, and she'd do a stand-up, and I absolutely loved her. I really admired her, and I used to listen to her and started to impersonate her. And I would get, a hat of my mom's and a big old coat, and I'd come down and I'd impersonate Hilda Baker and entertain the family. And often my mum would be watching television and she'd say, oh, this is boring. There's nothing on this television. Alison, do Hilda Baker. And I'd go, oh, great. So I'd run upstairs, get ready and come down and entertain them with Hilda Baker. And at Christmas time, when the family were around, I'd be the entertainment for the evening, or if there was a birthday party. And I absolutely loved it. And it became a regular thing. And I think that really kind of gave me that feeling of, ooh, I enjoy entertaining people. I really like being somebody else rather than myself. I've always felt happier being a character than being me. And once I'm in a costume and being a character, I feel really good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was wanting to talk about Liverpool, and we'll come to that in a moment. But when you just said that, it reminded me of when you were in secondary school. And, like many of us here, I'm sure, we have to read around the class, which is quite difficult, read Shakespeare around the class. And that didn't happen to you. You were invited to play a part, and it was Romeo, wasn't it?
Romeo,
your first Shakespeare.
Yes, I was at an all-girls school, and I think we were only about 12, and we were reading Romeo and Juliet. And then the teacher said, right, we're going to act some of this out now. So, Alison, if you would play Romeo. Oh, gosh, great, and so-and-so played Juliet, and we came up on stage, and we read a couple of scenes, and then we read the scene where Romeo thinks he finds Juliet dead, and he ends up saying, and with a kiss, I die, And of course, when it came to this bit, I was so in the character, and I went, and with a kiss, I die. And I flung myself on the floor. Well, the whole class just thought it was hilarious. And they were just laughing their heads off. And I was really upset because I thought, I'm actually being Romeo. And I think the woman I love is dead, and I'm being... And of course, the teacher was saying, stop laughing, everybody. Alison's being the character. And I remember it really hurting me that they didn't really believe what I was doing. And I suppose, throughout my career, that's me. I always would get completely involved in the character and be that character.
You grew up in Liverpool at a very exciting time for the city. It was the 60s, and pop music was becoming popular, and you just absorbed all of that.
Yeah, I was actually used to go, when I was 16, the Beatles were appearing at the Cavern, and I used to go, during the school holidays, I went to several lunchtime sessions, not the evening, because my mum heard about this Cavern, and she said, if I find out you've been to that Cavern, there'll be trouble. And I think, understandably, she was worried about me going into the city centre at night and going to this underground club where there was only one entrance and one exit, and you don't know who was going to be in this club. And so I promised her that I wouldn't go and of course we used to go, say we were going shopping at lunchtime, and we'd go to the cavern. And when my mum, when the Beatles became famous, I remember her saying to me, "You did go to that cavern, didn't you? What was it like?" And I told her, and we had a good laugh about it. But yeah, it was very exciting. And in fact, I was there. This was before the Beatles made their first records and became famous. They were just a band playing cover songs at the cavern. And I remember Paul saying, "Oh, hi, everyone. Say hello to Ringo Starr today because Pete Best can't be with us." Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the first time that Pete Best had played in public with the Beatles. So, yeah, that was quite an event. Yeah.
Imagine that, and you've got their signatures.
I've got Paul's autograph and John's, because we waited for them outside the cavern. We followed them down into the main city centre, and they went into the old post office. There was a big old Victorian building, which was a post office. And we, three of us, we crept in, and must have been really annoying for them, but we followed them in. And Paul finished filling in this form and handed it in. I think they were getting their passports because they were going to Germany, to Hamburg. And I said to Paul, "Can I have your autograph, please, Paul?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, love, yeah. What's your name?" So I said, "Alison." So he put 2 Alison, love, Paul, and a couple of kisses and handed it to me. Then he said, "Hey, give us that back a minute." So he took it back and he put Beatles. He didn't put McCartney on the autograph. I think he was so unused to signing autographs that he put Beatles in brackets underneath. And as he handed it back, he said, "I thought I'd better put the Beatles because in the future, someone's going to look at that and say, 'Who the hell's Paul?'" And then I said, John was sitting with an inkwell in this big desk, big old oak desk, and he was filling and dipping this pen in. I mean, sounds like Victorian England, doesn't it? But this was about 1963, I think, 62, 63, and he was filling this in, and I said, "Could I have his autograph, please?" And Paul said, "Hey, sign this for the girl." Gave it to John, and John didn't even look up. He literally went, "John Lennon," handed it back and just carried on. And then Paul said, "I'll take the notice, he's always like that."
Great story.
And indeed he was always like that.
When you were growing up and at school, was there an expectation that you would stay in Liverpool, you might work in a shop, or you might work in an office? Was there that sort of expectation as opposed to you'd go to London and to drama school?
Oh, yes. I mean, well, it was before the internet. It was before we knew anything about anything. I mean, there was only basically a couple of drama schools. One was RADA. I think Lambda was going at the time. But you couldn't look things up and find out about things. And so I joined Liverpool Youth Theatre, which was wonderful. And we had a great tutor there called Jim Wiggins, who had wanted to be an actor rather than a teacher, I think all his life. And he said to me, "Look, you should go to drama school. You should become a professional actress. We're going to do that." So he got in touch with the Liverpool Playhouse and got me to the Playhouse to meet the director there and other actors who were in the company so they could tell me. And this director said, "Oh, my daughter's going to drama school, to East 15 Acting School," which was a very radical drama school. And I got an audition. I auditioned, got a place, got a grant to go, because in those days you could, because my parents didn't have any money. And yes, I was extremely lucky, and I had 3 years there, and it kicked off my whole career.
You said that very swiftly, and I auditioned, and I got a part, and I went to drama school, as if you did that every day, but you'd never auditioned before. This was the first thing, and that audition was massive.
I was terrified, and I read a poem. Oh my God, when I think of it now, and I did something from a Greek tragedy. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was kind of doing this part of this one, Orestes, has it come to this? With these ashes in this pot, I didn't know what I was doing. And we had a wonderful, Margaret Berry, who ran the school, was auditioning me, nobody else, just the two of us. And she said to me, right, okay, let's stop now, let's stop. So I thought, oh, that's it. And she said to me, okay, let's do some improvisation, which was something I was happy with and I love doing and still do. And she said to me, okay, you are Cassius Clay, i.e. Muhammad Ali. And she suddenly said, you're Cassius Clay, and you've just won the World Heavyweight Championship, and all the cameras are around you and all the press, go. And so you can imagine, I'm 19 years old. First time I'd ever been to London. I'm standing, and she's asking me to be Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali. And I just leapt into it, and just started this, I am the greatest, I am, don't you tell me that I can't do it, doing all this, And she went, okay, stop. And then she said, right, you are in a stately home and you're the guide. And you've got a group of people with you and some children. Come in that door and do it. Okay. Came in the door and I went, right, here we are in this beautiful Victorian house. So come, stop doing that, don't sit on that chair. And I was doing all that kind of improvising, loving it because I was in my comfort zone rather than, being given a scene to do in a play. And I did all that. And at the end of it, she said, thank you very much. And we'll let you know.
Horrible thing to hear.
And I said, oh, thank you very much. I walked out, and I remember as I walked down the drive, there was a huge drive, it was a big old house, and the lady who'd welcomed me to the audition looked out, opened the window, and she shouted, how did it go? And I can still see the image of her now in the window, and I just said, I don't know, I think it was okay, but I don't know. And she went, well, fingers crossed. She was like that. And I went home, and a week later, I was on my way to work. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and the postman was walking up the street. My parents were in bed, and this man gave me a brown letter addressed to me. And I thought, this must be it. Brown envelope addressed to me. I opened it, and it just said, we are pleased to inform you. Oh, my goodness. And I remember I ran back up the street, ran in the house, went up to my parents and stood there in the bedroom with the letter, and I said, I got in, I got a place. I remember my mum started crying and hugging me, and my dad was hugging me. It was just so lovely, so lovely.
And it's important to remember that it was different back then. The times were different. You hadn't left the city. You'd maybe left the city once before. You certainly never left the city without a family member. So that was a huge adventure for you.
It was huge, yeah. I was really quite nervous about the whole thing. I mean, I didn't know it was Loughton in Essex, which is just on the outskirts of London. And I didn't have anywhere to stay. There were no halls of residence. You just had to find your own accommodation. But I got help. I worked in a probation office, and the probation office were lovely. We had to have all the Shakespeare books. We had to have a book by Stanislavski called An Actor Prepares. We had to have another book. And they clubbed together, the probation officers, and bought me all the books to go. I mean, they were really kind. And the head probation officer phoned up the probation office in Loughton and said, do you know anyone who's got a room to spare in their house? And indeed, they found me a room with this lady who I wasn't that keen on. I didn't stay that long. but it meant I did have somewhere to stay for the first few weeks. And it was a frightening experience, but very exciting as well. And gosh, I'm so glad I did it. It changed my life.
One of the things that's really striking in those early years that you talk about in the book is you are consistently observing people. So you had Saturday jobs and you were working in perfume departments and in shirt departments and constantly observing people. In the probation office, constantly observing people. And then after drama school, and this doesn't exist anymore, the repertory system in the UK was phenomenal. And it was like another opportunity to extend your training and to keep looking at people. Where did you go first? Where was your first, apart from Miss Jean Brodie at Lincoln, where did you go to do repertory theatre?
Well, I was invited to go back to Lincoln as a full-time actress, not just for the holidays. And so I was there for almost 6 months. And then I just kept writing letters and, auditioning and hoping I'd get a place. And I went to the Bolton Octagon in North London. And where did I go? I went...
The Little Theatre in Rhyl.
Oh, yes, I went to Rhyl. The Bolton Octagon toured to North Wales. And we did plays there. And that was, again, when you're... It is very different now. But then you were always looking for digs in, there was always a sort of elderly lady somewhere who wanted to make a bit of money because she had a house with a few spare rooms. And so she'd let them to actors from the local theatre. And so I would stay in these various places and learn from all these people and have the best fun because they were always interesting, extraordinary people. And one lady at Lincoln, I remember, she looked like she was still from the 50s. She always wore sort of sticky out dresses and she was terribly like this, Everything had to be, she's, are you married? And I said, oh, yes, and I used to wear a curtain ring on my finger, And my boyfriend used to come for the weekend, and she said to me, and Jean Boat, the actress Jean Boat, was staying in the same digs. And this particular day, she said to me, Jean Boat's husband's coming at the weekend, and she is married. And I said, and we used to have a little rent book. We used to have to pay rent every week. And you used to have to take the rent book on a Saturday morning, hand it to her, and she was in a living room. She had a little desk, and then she'd take it off me, pay the money, and she'd fill it in with the amount and the date, and then hand it back. And she was, I suppose, a woman. She was about 60, I suppose. And her husband was retired, and I remember he was absolutely deaf, 100% deaf, couldn't hear a thing. And Saturday morning, I took my rent book down and knocked on the door, and she came, she opened it, oh, thank you. And she walked across the room towards her desk. As she passed by his chair, he had his back to me in his chair, so he didn't know I was there. As she walked past, he put his hand up her skirt, went like this, and she went, duff, 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 duff. Went over to the desk, and she filled in the thing. And as she walked back, she was very flushed and looking very... And she got to the door, and she handed me the book, and she said, you will have to excuse him. He's just had a bath. Gave me the book, and I said, I'm, 22 or something, and I just went, oh, right, I run away. I laughed later on, but at the time, I was really embarrassed, you could imagine. And all the time, we were meeting these amazing people. And I often now, if I talk to students and chat to them, and they're always saying, oh, I haven't got any money to do this or go to the theatre. And I say, well, I'm sorry about that. And yes, I know it's difficult, but people, you are playing people, and people are there to observe, to look at. If you're on a bus, on the tube, walking in the street, in a cafe, look at people, look at what they're wearing. Say, why is that lady wearing this? Why is that man wearing that? And absorb people. I said, it's free. The world is free out there. Listen to their voices. Listen to their accents. We had a wonderful voice coach when I was at drama school. And she said to me, now, what I want you to do is this. When you watch television and you're listening to the news, or you're listening to news on the radio, and you've got this RP woman speaking, as she speaks, repeat it after her. And I used to love doing that. And I still do it now sometimes, just for fun. And it means that you're hearing and you're learning to speak the way this person's speaking. And so, and it all happened because I was doing some Shakespeare, and I had to sing a Shakespearean song. And this voice teacher, she was a wonderful lady, and she said to me afterwards, she said, now, I want to tell you this. Do you realize that you sang that song with an American accent? And I said, what? no, what did I? And she said, yes, you did. She said, now, and then she started making me listen, repeat, listen, repeat, listen. And it was the best advice. And it's wonderful. So if I have to do an accent now, and I'm not sure of the accent, or I want to make sure I'm going to get it right, I'll go online and find that accent and just sit and listen and repeat it and repeat it. And it's a wonderful lesson.
Well, that inclination that you have, which I think is ingrained to observe and absorb, really stood you in good stead when you went on to initially do the stage play, Abigail's Party, and you played the infamous Beverly. So tell us how Beverly came to life.
Yeah, when I'm improvising, I'm probably in my favourite spot. That's what I love. And Mike Lee, the director, got a group of us together, and he said, we're going to make a play. We've got 8 weeks to do it. We're going to create characters. We're going to put those characters together and eventually make a play. And so it's quite daunting in a way, but very exciting in another way. And so his method is to sit you down individually and say, I want you to go away and have 5 characters, 5 people that you know, and come back and tell me about them. And so I did that, and he picked one of these characters and said, I want you to base your character on that woman you've just talked about. And I described this woman that I remember from my growing up years in Liverpool. And then he started to say to me, what work would she do? What would she? And I said, well, I think she'd like to be a model. And so I began to walk around in a certain way like a model would. And these shoulders began to go up as the character. And then he said to me, what work? And I said, well, she'd probably like to be, a top makeup artist, makeup designer. And he said, okay, well, you need to find out about that. So I went to Selfridges in London to their top, makeup department, to their top makeup designer, and she sat and talked to me. And then I went down in the shop and I stood and watched this woman make up these ladies who were all kind of, members of the public she'd gathered round, and she did makeup on them. And all this, I absorbed it all and gradually developed this character of Beverly. And that all, this became this character, and we made a play, and it was great fun. And we ended up performing it on television. They recorded it for television because they thought it was so good. And so it was thrilling.
I meant to tell you yesterday on Instagram, which I don't really know very much about, but there's a model called Jenny Howarth, and she's fantastic. She's quite scatty, and she was looking at the camera. She's never made up at all, and she was doing her lipstick, and she absolutely quoted Beverly from Abigail's Party.
Oh, really?
Do that scene for us. It's wonderful. And the lipstick tuition.
Well, there's a scene in the play when, the play is based in my character's house with their husband, and they're having neighbours round for drinks. So the neighbours come round for drinks, a woman on her own and a couple. And this couple, the young woman, she's terribly nice, but she's like a sort of innocent puppy dog. She's sort of, hi, hi, like this. And she hasn't done a lipstick very well. She hasn't done a makeup very well. And Beverly says to her at one point, now, Ange, I can see what you've done. You've just sat down and put your lipstick on. Now, next time, can you do this for me? Sit down in front of the mirror, take your lipstick, look at yourself, and say to yourself, I've got very beautiful lips. And then apply a lipstick, and I promise you'll see the difference. Can you do that for me? And so this innocent little puppy dog of a lady, she goes, yeah. What do you say? I've got very beautiful lips. And then apply a lipstick. And I promise you, Ange, You see the difference?
Brilliant.
And that's what we did in the play. And the audience loved it, and it was great fun. And the woman that I watched in Selfridges, I just remember her. She had a little microphone in the corner of her mouth, and she said to the group of women that she'd gathered around, "Now then, everybody, this is a beautiful green eyeshadow. Now this, in Paris this week, is tops. This is a top seller in Paris this week. And what does that mean? That means that next week in London, it's going to be a top seller. So buy it today, all right?" And this is what she was like. And so I absorbed all that, and I loved it. And I watched her, for the best part of the day. And then when we came to improvise, I used a lot of that. And it was, great fun.
It was a huge success, Abigail's party, and it was like the key to the door to so many other parts. And I want to just quickly sort of go much further forward now to the 90s, and you were cast as Mrs. Bennet, and I'm sure many people have seen that, Mrs. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Which must have been scary. It's an iconic part and a very famous piece of literature. And there you are taking on this role, sitting in a pub, nervously waiting to go to have your first day.
Yeah, so it was quite scary, because the weight of the responsibility of being the BBC's production, and wanting to get it right, and we hadn't sort of started filming yet, and I was sitting in a pub near where we were going to film, and there was a group of women sitting nearby, and I was with somebody, we're having a sandwich and a drink or whatever, and this woman suddenly sort of went like that to me, and I looked, and she said, "I want you to remember this, that the eyes of the world will be upon you." And I said, "Oh, yes, the eyes of the world will be upon you." Now you can imagine somebody saying that, and with a pointed finger, And I just sat there and I thought, yeah, I know you're probably a member of the Jane Austen Society. You think I'm bad casting, and you really want to put me down, And she said it a third time. And in the end, I just turned around to her and I said, "Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, and I've heard you say it 3 times. Please don't say it again." And I just ignored her, and she shut up. But it was really horrible. But anyway, luckily we had one of the best directors I've ever worked with, a kind, lovely man, but a lovely producer. And the whole atmosphere was magic. It was absolutely brilliant. And I had probably one of the happiest 6 months of my working life was doing that.
Of course, you're on location and you have to stay elsewhere. So where did you stay?
They put us up in a hotel in a place called Malmesbury, which was 4 miles from the location. And we were in this wonderful big house, and the designer, everything was top. She'd gone in, she'd redecorated half the house exactly as it would have been in Jane Austen's time, and done all these, and we had wonderful costumes and everything. And the lady who owned the house was very elderly, and she was a lovely woman, and she used to have this car, and I remember she used to drive, and she used to sit in the seat, and the steering wheel would be up here, and she'd be driving like this, she'd be like that. And she was a lovely lady. And this particular day, I was ready in my costume, waiting to film, and I was standing there, and she said to me, "Oh, good morning, Alison. Are you well?" And I said, "Oh, yes, thank you, yes." And she said, "How are you?" So I said, "Oh, I'm fine." I said, I'm really happy and everything, but I am very tired this morning." And she said, "Oh, where are you staying?" So I said, "Oh, in a hotel in Malmesbury." "And have you travelled all the way from Malmesbury this morning?" And I said, yes, I have." And she went, "Oh, no wonder you're exhausted." 4 miles. And it was all I could do not to sort of have to really just laugh for about 10 minutes, you know. But she was a delightful lady, and I really respected her and liked her a lot. She had about, 10 acres of land around her house. And we're going back now to, 1995. She would not allow fox hunting on her land. And so when the fox hunters came, they had to go right the way round. She was determined to try and stop fox hunting. She was a lovely lady. I was very fond of her.
The book is infused with your laughter, and we could have a whole session just on laughter alone and the amount of giggles you've had during your whole career. But we won't do that. What we're going to do for the brief time that we've got left is we're going to open the conversation out to all the audience and take some questions. So if you've got a question, please do put your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you as quickly as possible. We've got a few more moments before we have to finish. So are there any questions? There's one right at the back there. There we go. Thank you.
Hello, Alison.
Hello.
I was really interested to hear you talking about your drama school experience. Was there anything you had to unlearn from drama school when you went into the industry?
Nice question. Anything you've had to unlearn, sort of get rid of? The movement, that's interesting, the neutral walk.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great drama school. We had a wonderful time. And there was about 10 of us women in my year. And one of the wonderful teachers, you had a wonderful lady called Maria Santivani, and she was absolutely wonderful. And she would put a tape in a square on the floor, and she would say, stand in the corner, and I want you to walk across from corner to corner in a neutral walk. So I don't want any of your personality, any of your own movements. I want it to be completely neutral. And it was quite difficult to do. And we had a girl in our class who was, she was very clever, but she could not do a neutral walk. And if I didn't have this awful foot, I would impersonate her for you. But she would swing her hips, like this. And she was the kind of girl, she said to me once, she said, now, Alison, I'll tell you what you want to do. When you buy your next bra, get one that's size smaller, because it'll make your boobs look bigger on the top. Things like this. And I just think, what are you talking about, But all these things, I suppose, I brought with me. And when you're playing a character, you don't want to walk as yourself. You want to be the character. So what you do, first of all, is go into neutral and then add on how they would walk. So that was one of the things I never unlearned. I hung on to that.
Another question, if there is one.
Nobody's got a question. Okay,
yes, we have.
No,
there we go. One over here, right at the front. Fabulous. And as quickly as you've missed the person there. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. First of all, thank you, Alison. I think you're an absolute icon. Second of all, if you grew up in Liverpool, did you have a Scouse accent and you had to unlearn it?
That's only what you're talking about. What do you mean? What's a Scouse accent? Yes, I did, but it wasn't a strong accent. For a start off, the Scouse accent has changed over the last 50 years. And also, when I went to an all-girls grammar school, and we used to have elocution lessons at school. And my mother as well. I mean, when at that age, you start saying, yeah, and she would go, it's not a yeah, it's a yes. So you were always getting corrected by your parents and that. And as I say, but I did have an accent. But this wonderful voice teacher at drama school, she taught me to listen to myself and to then be able to get rid of that, which is why she got me repeating the news on the television or on the radio so that I could be aware of accents throughout the country and indeed throughout the world, The one accent I still never got right is Spanish, but it's always a journey, and I love it, absolutely love it. And indeed, I love Liverpool, and I go back whenever I can.
There's a question at the front, I think. Microphone to the front, as quickly as you can. That's great. Thank you. Run, run, run. Oh, thank you. Great.
Hey, Alison.
Oh,
There we go. I think you can hear me.
yep.
Hi there. Are there any characters you would still like to play?
Oh, gosh. Well, the great thing about having acted for all these years, and I am always amazed that I've managed to earn a living acting all my life since I left drama school. And I feel quite proud of myself for doing that, being able to pay the rent and the mortgage and all the rest of it over the years. But the exciting thing is, you never know what's around the corner. You never know when your agent rings up what you're going to be offered. And so I suppose I don't sit thinking, oh, I'd love to play, so-and-so in this play. I just wait for the phone to ring and my agent to say, oh, look, you've been offered this. Do you want to have a look at it? And I'll say, yeah, okay. And I'll know pretty well immediately whether I want to do it or not. Yeah. And I love that. I love it.
Often things happen by absolute chance. And you were playing Betty in Fat Friends with Ruth Jones and James Corden.
Yeah.
And that was over several series. And they formed a creative relationship then, and began to write this thing called Gavin and Stacey,
Yeah.
and had a part with you in mind. What was it like when they said, would you fancy reading this for us?
Yeah, well, I didn't know that they were writing anything. And of course, James comes from a town just outside London, a bit like Billericay. Not Billericay, but it's like that. Ruth is from Wales, and they got together and they put this wonderful series together. And they sent me the first episode they'd written and just said, have a look at this, see what you think. We'd like you to read the part of Pam. And when I read the first scene, and it was Pam lying on the couch, she's been crying and she's got cucumbers on her eyes, and her son comes home from work, Gavin, a little prince, and he says, you all right, Mum? And she says, no, I'm not actually. I'm really upset. I've been crying because I've been watching the little badgers on the television and their little baby badgers died, and and they were crying. And he says, Mum, badgers don't cry. He says, Gavin, I know what I saw. And anyway, got to get on, and she's going to make his dinner. And when I read this scene, I thought, oh, that is so brilliant. I love it. And then as I read Pam, and then me and Larry read together for the director and the casting people, and it clicked between us. That Pam and Mick thing, it just felt right. And ba-bum, and it all happened. And James, shortly after the series was commissioned by the BBC, he went to work in New York in a play, a One Man, Two Governors, I think it was. And so he's got this long run, and the BBC said, look, we need this by the 2nd of March or whenever. So Ruth flew out to New York, stayed with him in New York, or stayed near him in New York, and the two of them would write during the day, and James would perform at night, so that they could get the series finished to give to the BBC and say, please, we hope this is as good as you wanted. And indeed it was.
Indeed it was.
And that was 17 years ago. Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, please, and you can get it, do watch right up to the amazing final episode, which came out just a few weeks ago on the BBC.
Night. Yeah.
Yes, it was wonderful. This is a delightful book. It's full of so many more stories. But as that is interesting in itself. But what I feel is most interesting, I'd like to pick up on the length of time you've been doing what you do. You travel with an actress through her career. And it's not just the career, it's also being a woman and facing all those different things that we do face as we go through our lives as women or as people. And I think that there's a lot of humanity in it. There's huge amounts of humor. And you are, as we said at the beginning, only ever yourself. And that it makes it very, very special. And I really feel that we get to know you reading this. I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for coming, Alison. All this way, thank you for being on the stage with your foot in your hand. Thank you for entertaining us with such great stories. You're a natural-born storyteller, and we truly, truly appreciate it. I'd also like to say thank you to all of the room staff here. I'd like to say thank you all for coming on this Sunday afternoon. Thank you. Lots of thank yous coming up, everyone. Thank you to Dubai Calendar. Thank you to Dubai Duty Free. Thank you to the Emirates Literature Foundation. And thank you to Emirates Airline, the headline sponsor. But our biggest thank you, once again, and please make it a huge one, is to Alison, who will be signing copies of her book afterwards. Thank you, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you all. My wheelchair, please.
Thank you.